All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. No matter where you hail from, I just want to welcome you to our webinar on AI-driven CX innovation, personalizing product discovery and engagement. I'm Charles Stewart. I'm coming from Silicon Valley. I have a long background in building AI products and AI integrations into enterprise. Super passionate about this, as our two panelists are as well. And I'll be moderating today. So we're thrilled to have you join us in this insightful conversation about the transformative power of AI in enhancing customer and employee experience. So just at a high level, what are our goals today? We want to look at the current landscape of AI. We want to look at some of the common challenges and pitfalls in AI adoption. And we want to look at how innovative solutions like those from Lucidworks can really drive improvement, especially in search and discovery capabilities. So our goal here is to provide you with actionable insights and practical advice that you can take back to your organizations today. So let's meet some of the awesome folks here that are going to help us on this journey. So we have William Tsang, who's the Senior Director, Technical Solutions at Lucidworks, brings a wealth of experience in AI-powered search and discovery. William, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and what got you into AI?
Yeah. Hey, Charles, how's it going? No, I've actually, funny enough, 15 years, that actually starts at when I graduated from college, and I've been doing search pretty much since then. I got hired by a consulting firm, and that's what they wanted me to do straight out of college. And really, I've been, throughout my career, had the opportunity to launch a bunch of mission and revenue critical search and AI applications within a lot of the Fortune 100. A lot of that was with Lucidworks. And honestly, as search and AI keep growing, I really don't see myself changing career paths. It's been very, very exciting over the past 15 years to see this entire industry evolve. Maybe some random personal facts. I hail from the Chicago suburbs. I live with my wife out here, and I've got 5 dogs. You may hear them saying hi to some squirrels or pass by in our backyard and or our front room, but hopefully they'll stay quiet for most of it.
All right.
My dogs say hi to the squirrels quite a bit, more than I want them to.
Well, welcome, William. And by the way, folks, a lot of folks are just sharing us where they're from. Here we have Detroit, we have California, we have New York, we have San Francisco, etc. So just want to, everybody that told us where you're from, we see you. We appreciate you being here. Seth, folks want to know about you and what your background is and what you're passionate about. So over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I have 3 Havanese dogs and I have 2 Bengal kitties, and they love to play with one another. And, you know, the dogs will harass the cats, but the cats just kind of complain and Aikido them. They kind of get out of their way and the dog comes running off. So it's very funny. I have been in the information management space for 30 years, and I wrote a book called The AI-Powered Enterprise back in 2020. And when I saw, and the work I do is in information architecture, knowledge management, product information management to support lots of different types of initiatives, a lot of search types of projects. And when I first saw ChatGPT, I thought, I had an existential crisis. I thought, is my work no longer necessary? And the more research I did and the more I looked into it, the more I realized it's more valuable than ever. It's more essential than ever. And that everything in that book from 4 years ago is still completely applicable, if not essential, to generative AI. I've also been named as one of the top influencers and thought leaders in AI, and we've also recently been interviewed by Harvard Business Research Analytics Services. I can get you, I think that article is going to be in your assets section. Also feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect with folks. And so a lot of the work that we do has been always about helping organizations prepare and get their data infrastructure in order, get their processes in order, and then build the actual applications that enable them to take advantage of AI. So it really comes back to search and retrieval when we talk about retrieval augmented generation. I won't get into all those details right now, but my point is that we still have the search problem, we still have the retrieval problem, and Lucidworks happens to be a very good product for that. But you know, that's off to the side. We'll talk about that later. But that's a little bit about me and my background.
Thank you so much. So as everyone can tell, we're joined by some awesome thought leaders. And I can share in my own experience, having built internal search, custom-based things at places like Workday and Autodesk, it's incredibly hard to build your own stuff. It's often not the most efficient thing to do. You want to be solving other problems. So to see these kind of amazing technology providers come to help enterprises solve this, it's very exciting for the integrators in-house, like myself. Okay, back to the audience. Like, how do you, we 100% are excited about your engagement. And we're going to have 3 sections here, and we're going to ask you to source some of our questions. So those of you that put where you're from, you're already integrating with the chat feature really well. And you also have an opportunity to upvote each other's questions, things that you are all really interested in. I know that Seth and William will really want to speak to those things. So my first question to our audience is, what's something that you really hope to learn from today in this webinar? So if you could go to the chat and just put something that you're interested in. It could be some of the technical aspects of it. It could be where to start in your journey. I'd love to just see some of the things that are on your mind today and what you're excited to learn about. Okay, and I'll read some of these in as they come in, but to get us started, I'm going to pass it over to William so we can just learn a little bit more about LucidWorks. Over to you, William.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Charles. So, I don't want this to be like a super pitch, right, for the company, and our product, right? Obviously, I'm super excited to be here with CMS Wire, Charles and Seth, and just to really talk about, landscape of the AI industry and search and how it's just transforming, with cutting edge solutions, and overall, like how you all can harness, some of the things that we're going to talk about today within your businesses and your enterprises. But about LucidWorks, it's a little bit about us, right? We have been in the search and AI space for a little bit over 15 years. We were founded in 2007. We had a simple vision when we first started, right? We wanted to really revolutionize how companies leverage their data to make more informed decisions, right? And search was a very core part of that. And, we believe that the power of data to transform businesses, how we drive innovation, and create unparalleled user experiences, right, is actually really the forefront of, all AI-driven search technology, right? So our product called Fusion empowers organizations, right, to unlock the full potential of that data, right? So wherever you're getting that data, right, you've got your product catalogs, you've got your knowledge management, you've got user insights and actions, right, that the users are taking against, what they're looking for, what they're searching for, right? We want to give companies intelligent search, personalized recommendations, right, and things that are actionable within your analytics to help improve that experience for your customers and for the people that use search within your client base, right? So our commitment there doesn't really just stop at technology. LucidWorks actually used to be a consulting company before we really founded as a product company in 2007. So we've actually been around for a lot of expert services with search for a very long time. We pride ourselves in continuing to foster those strong partnerships with our clients, not just from a product perspective, but also understanding their unique challenges, right, and working with them, in collaboration to drive success, right? So we've got a big team of experts. We're dedicated, to providing top-notch support for our clients and partnering with folks like Seth and other partners to, deliver a lot of those things as well. So I'm obviously excited to be here, to speak with you all. And just a very quick blurb about us as a company.
Thanks for that. And we're going to go back in and learn more about LucidWorks. So those of y'all that are excited or you want to keep learning, we'll have the opportunity. One of the biggest jokes when I was in the Army that people would always say is there's only one thief in the Army. Everyone else is just trying to find their stuff. And when I came into tech, and these companies that I admire, like I just assumed that everybody would be able to find their stuff easily at work. And that's just not the case. Like even in some of the most advanced technology companies, findability is a challenge. You think about the new employee experience, you think about the new customer experience to learn everything there is. There's still so much value to be gained in better findability. That was one of my big surprises in my own journey. Okay, Seth, we want to hear a little bit now, like where are we in the state of AI? Like what is going on? What is unique about this moment that we're in? And what are you seeing as you consult and these companies transform?
Well, I want to start with, excuse me, the end in mind. And when does this not work? And this is what's really important, because one of the things that we realize is that generative AI has value, but it's not the way organizations are using it. They should not be using it to find the answer within the large language model itself. And that's the power behind Gen AI. They should be using it to access their data for customers and for employees. So that's kind of the core of this whole idea. And that's why search and retrieval is still the core problem. But when you start looking at these projects that don't go anywhere, a lot of times it's really, there's a misalignment with the business. There's real unrealistic expectations. People are hearing a lot about the marketplace and getting a lot of information from vendors, and they are getting misinformation. They are getting they're getting their expectations set at a level that is not realistic. And I hear this and see this all the time. And a lot of times there's a broad scope or an ambiguous outcome. People say, well, we need to deploy AI. Well, to do what? For what purpose, right? And so we need to make sure we've defined our very specific narrow scope for at least the initial deployment of AI. And a lot of times people don't have that clearly defined outcome, so you don't know what good looks like. You have to be able to measure good. You need to have a baseline. You need to be instrumented so that you can say, what process are we trying to impact? And then how do we improve that process? The other thing that we are finding is that many times people don't understand the process or haven't fully mapped out a process. And when you have ill-defined processes, it's very difficult to determine where you can have an intervention. So you need clarity around the process. And if you can't figure out the process, AI won't be able to figure out the process, right? There's some people that say, well, we don't have a process for that. We're just going to use whatever technology vendor recommends. And that doesn't make sense. You do have a process. It may be poorly defined. It may be very ad hoc, but you really need to understand what that process is. And I like to say, you can't automate a mess. Well, actually, you can automate a mess, but you can't automate what you don't understand. And so it's very important to understand the core processes and then what you're trying to do, where you can instrument this, where you can speed up the information flow, get people information they didn't have, and get them faster information, better quality information, whatever it might be. And then what's the impact to downstream processes? The other piece is data. And people don't have the right quote unquote training data. And this used to be very confusing because vendors say, well, we need to train the AI. We don't have enough training data. We need to spend more time training. Well, what do you train with? You train with assets, knowledge assets, data assets, content assets. It has to be structured correctly. And what you're doing with an LLM is if you just use it for its knowledge of the world, it doesn't have your information about your processes. It doesn't know your competitive advantage. It doesn't know how you serve your customers. It doesn't have your IP. So if you use an LLM generically, you'll get efficiency, but you will not get competitive advantage. You get differentiation, gives you competitive advantage. Organizations differentiate on their knowledge. And that's how we need to use generative AI to access our knowledge. And many times they're missing the core architecture. People talk about ontologies or taxonomies or knowledge graphs. All that is a scaffolding for knowledge and information in the organization. And it gives the LLM a source of ground truth. So that's very important for us to have when we're building these things. And then socialization. They say that Peter Drucker used to say that culture would eat strategy for breakfast. Well, culture eats AI for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And the idea is that the adoption needs to be intentional. The change management needs to be intentional, needs to be planned. You need to be able to, people need to be able to trust the results. So you need to validate that with your stakeholders and your users. People need to be able to believe in this stuff. Otherwise, they're not going to use it. And that's why those first impressions are very, very important. If it's not ready for prime time, do it with a small group, get feedback, iterate from there. But again, we need to be able to make sure people trust this stuff and will use it. And then at the end of the day, we have to have those success metrics. If we don't know what our target is and what that metric is, we don't know if we've succeeded or not. So that means we need to build libraries of use cases, and those use cases need to have baseline metrics. So that's kind of where we need to think about these things when we look at AI overall. These are kind of themes that come up frequently.
Thanks for that, Seth. I just in processing and listening to you, one of the ways that I tried to explain to my aunt around the data piece is like, if you think about AI as a great robotic chef that can create all your favorite meals, you still need fresh ingredients in the right place, in the right part of the kitchen for it to operate. And if your ingredients are old, it's not going to create a great experience. And if they're not in the right compartment, data labeling, it's not going to be able to work for you. So that's a visualization that I found that can be a bit helpful to complement. All right. So, and by the way, for the folks that shared what they want to learn about, I appreciate y'all. We're going to talk a little bit about what we see in industry and hear from William and Seth, and then we're going to dig in to some of these exciting use cases that will help us make this really concrete. So first question over to you, William, like when you work with execs and leaders to help them in their journey with LucidWorks technology, what's a common challenge that you really see them or something that is complex as they're trying to get started and really realize this value in their company?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually do want to tag on to, I love your recipe formula there as talking about, ChatGPT and other LLMs. And honestly, even if you have a recipe, it's never as good as how your grandma or your mom made it, because, those recipes always had their touch, their kind of unique flavor, which, to me, like kind of pulls in the idea of like an organization. Just everyone has their own little flavor of doing the things the way they do, right? Which is super critical, as folks are looking both at public and private LLMs, right? Like those are all trained on data that's all the same, right? It's very ubiquitous what you're looking at there. But that's that mom and pop touch that really make LLMs kind of shine, right? And, be very successful within kind of in terms of a company like their specific brand. But in terms of just like complexities and, what execs face, I think like everyone, especially within the hype train, like started to panic, right? Like, folks who hadn't been super deep with AI, right? They might have a team of data scientists that are working on some stuff on the back end. Like suddenly, like they all got thrusted all the way to the front of the queue, right? And now everyone, wants to either hire data scientists, they want to try to get, whatever they wanted out of, ChatGPT into their own systems, right? And I always say, let's not panic too much, right? Like that explosive growth and that hype, from 2023 to 2024, like it's decreasing a little bit, right? Like the general spend for Gen AI, I think was around like 92%. Like everyone said they were spending on Gen AI in 2023. And that number actually has decreased to about 64%, right? Like that number is slowly coming down based on some studies that we did, especially with retailers that were focused in on how they can improve the retail experience, right? And doesn't mean like people aren't investing and that rate of investment isn't high, right? But companies are starting to begin to actually go back to some of their old processes, right? Like Seth mentioned, you have to have good processes in order to, develop good technology, right? Like now they're actually pulling back and trying to see what are the risks of deploying Gen AI and the costs of adapting these new technologies within their stacks. And they're actually finally coming back and going through the steps that they probably should have gone through in the first place, rather than relying on a lot of the hype that was there. So we're seeing that very interesting trend of people kind of pulling back a little bit and actually simplifying a lot of things that they're doing, right? And really looking at, things like cost and spend and margin, right? I'll wrap this a little bit here with like, with a couple more stats that we actually pulled from a lot of our retailers. Like out of the folks that we talked with, like only 25% of like any Gen AI initiatives from like 2023 to 2024 actually made it into production, right? So that was the success rate, which is quite low, right? And through those that made it into production, about 50% of them actually demonstrated revenue and cost savings, right? So your flip of a coin at this point in time of deploying something and seeing if it actually succeeds, right, based off of what you spent, right, and the margin that is actually generating based off of whatever experience is providing to your user. So as an exec, you're facing those types of challenges and pressures, right, from whether that's your board or anyone else to get Gen AI out there, right, like go back. And I apologize, my camera has been on the fritz and it just went off, but I'll keep talking. Go back, like go do your due diligence, go do the research right out there. And I think we're going to talk about that in a second, right? Go do your research, right? And go figure out like, how do you distinguish the things that you need to do within the market, right?
Yeah,
so don't panic.
I think, and listening to you, William, too, and building those AI applications in-house, one thing I think of too is don't be too big for the low complexity use cases. Like, it's okay to start with a more basic AI use case. Think about insights from meetings. Like, you don't just have to go for the huge, uh, uh, ginormous investment to move your company forward. And that also speaks to what Seth was talking about, how it's culture too. So sometimes you're giving your teams and your teammates times to adjust and to use this technology there. Seth, I'm going to go over to you here. And,
Sure.
William was talking about really the noise out there.
Mhm. Yeah.
And there's a lot. So like, what are some insights and advice you give
Sure.
to leaders to sift through that and really make good investments that
Yeah.
make sense for their company?
Yeah, it's a problem that pervades the industry. There's so much what I call aspirational functionality, right? Meaning they want to do it, they intend to do it, they'll get to it one day, but they don't have it now. But they'll sell it as though they have it now. So it's not that they're lying. I guess you could say they're lying, but they're aspirational functions, right? They're not there yet. And so you have to separate that out from what's real today. And the best way to do that is to be clear on your use cases. And with your data, you give the vendor your data and your use case, and you say, show me with my data, show me with my use case. Because otherwise, everything demos well in PowerPoint, right? They're going to have great references. They're going to have great stories. They're going to, all their marketing materials are going to check all the boxes. But I have found vendor after vendor after vendor, I would say about 30% of the vendors who I have in-depth conversations with can really do what they say they're doing. About 30%. And that's me recognizing, because I dig in to the details behind, well, how are you doing this? How are you doing that? And really getting down to brass tacks. I think, organizations face a lot of problems and challenges with this because, number one, they have to decide what those use cases are, right? And they can't be just dictated by a vendor because the vendor is going to show what they do. And it's, to every man with a hammer, everything's a nail, right? So you need to think about your use cases and what's important to the business, and then understanding those processes so that you can determine where the intervention is, then look at the data. And again, another problem is fixing the data, right? And that's where you talked about POCs not going to production. We build POVs because what they do is they say, what's it going to take to get this to production? What's the data going to look like? What's that production environment going to look like? So you need to think about that. You need to think of POVs, not POCs. And the vendor has to tell you everything that needs to be done to get to deployment, to get to full operationalization. Otherwise, they're only giving you part of the solution. But in order to separate the noise from the hype, it's very difficult. It's great to have somebody, guide you who has done it before. Certainly, that's stuff that our company does, but in a vendor agnostic way. But the point is that you need to be able to identify the data, what you need for process, governance, decision-making, use cases, business objective, metrics, right? And that's not that difficult, right? It sounds like a lot, but a lot of times you can get that POV plan in 3 to 6 weeks, right? In terms of a quite rapid results type of a situation. And you can start to look at your vendors from the perspective of what's the functionality we need to satisfy these business requirements.
I love that answer. It really resonates with me in my journey too. And Melissa, I think this goes to your question of what pitfalls to be on the lookout when you're starting out, because what problem are you trying to solve, right, for your business? If you're highly anxious and you feel like you FOMO, you have a fear of missing out, and you're like, I need AI, I need AI, I need AI, you might make some purchasing decisions that won't translate into value for your company. But if you're really specific and know what problem you're trying to solve and know what data you need, everything that Seth said is 100% right. William, what would you add to this conversation, or what's a aspect that really resonates with you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot today around privacy and regulatory concerns, right? Like the whole concept of RAG essentially almost got generated out of the fact that, like, the entire world said, hey, we got data trained on, all of the public data sets that kind of currently exist out there. And then, to put that mom and pop touch on that data set in terms of training, you've got to then potentially send your data into it. right? And there was a lot of issues there, right? Legitimate questions about, how data incorporates into different LLM training sets, like what do you need to send to it, what's, private, what's public. Over in Europe, obviously with GDPR, like there's so many different things, right, that need to be taken into account. So like large enterprises these days, then particularly those in like very heavily regulated industries, like they're starting to really exercise a lot of extreme caution in terms of what they do with their company and their customer data. Some even just are banning ChatGPT within their own organization, right, based off of their own data protection and regulatory backlash. And that's something that I think, like, when we think about executives, right, you've got folks that obvious executives that are working on the innovation half of it. You also have, your CISOs that are focused in on this half of the house, which is, how do you make sure that what you're doing, what you're building is, to spec, to based off of both legal ramifications of your data, right? So like as you think about sending your data out to different types of SaaS vendors, right? Like a lot of SaaS vendors out there that are claiming to do Gen AI, they're often just a pass through to ChatGPT, right? Like what exactly are they doing on the back end with your data, right? Like if they're not being very open with you about that, then like that means that they're trying to hide something about what they actually do on their back end, right? So keep those types of things in mind as well if you're thinking about, especially the bigger the company you get, the larger your privacy and regulatory concerns start to become.
100%. And Omar, I really like what you wrote here: maturity informs strategy, and strategy informs use cases, because that speaks to what I was trying to say earlier about don't sleep on the low complexity use cases here to apply AI in your enterprise, because that might be where you're at, and then you can gain momentum there. And it's also those first use cases that you bring in AI, they should be successful to get to what Seth was talking about building the culture change there. You don't want to put everything into one big use case and it's a flop and they don't see why it works and then they aren't energized around it. So, hey, we're going to move forward. We talked a little bit about state of industry and some of the big things that we're seeing. One other note I had listening to William is our legal teammates that we work with in technology teams, they are changing too and upskilling into this in terms of how they can help us weigh risk and reward as we move things into production. So that's something that really resonated with me, William, as I was listening to you, is they're picking up new skills to be good teammates as we bring this technology in-house. Okay, let's go. We're going to talk about some practical examples in our use case. First question is going to be to you, Seth, and then we'll pass the ball over to you, William. What are some of the initial use cases that you're seeing right now that have really clear return on investment in this space? And I'm going to add a little bonus too, if you see any of those that touch CX, that touch that customer experience too.
Sure.
So you have to, but that's a bonus.
Well, it all touches customer experience. At the end of the day, if it's not impacting the customer, what's the point, right? I mean, it can be impacting someone who impacts the customer, which is fine. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to improve the customer experience in one way, shape, or form, or improve the ability for someone to support that customer experience. So with that, we are seeing kind of classical knowledge management problems being solved with tools that are on steroids. So the idea is that you have the ability to not only cleanse and improve and enrich your data and your content and your knowledge using Gen AI, and we have some approaches using what are called templated prompts, which allow you to programmatically look through content and your data and then prompt the LLM to cleanse that data with other reference sources, such as an ontology, a knowledge graph, using what we call modular RAG, which has lots of different processes, just like search pipeline processes, right? If you're familiar with search, you have different algorithms to do different things. The same thing happens with retrieval augmented generation. And at the end of the day, it fixes your data. It fixes your product data. It fixes your knowledge. And this is something that people have been talking about for years, but not being able to do. And there's been some recent breakthroughs with being able to do that. So recommendations, personalization, personalized search, everything is about context. Everything is about getting people the information they need in the context of their background, their role, their task, their objective, their history, their experience. And what that requires is an understanding of customer data and the customer attributes and the customer identity graph, right? So who are you? What's your role? What industry do you work in? What are your interests? What's your title? What are your problems? What equipment do you own, right? All of those things form that metadata cloud around an individual. We use that in order to inform personalization. So when we're doing search, we can give you a different search experience if you're an engineer versus your procurement manager. We can also show different product attributes depending on whether you're an engineer or procurement manager, whoever you are. All of these things are tuned to your digital body language, the things that you throw off when you are interacting with an organization. Everything that is instrumented to touch the customer throws off data exhaust. That data exhaust goes into these algorithms and allows you to build recommendations and personalization that is much, much more accurate, that again helps people with doing their tasks. So, when you go to a website and you go, oh, this website's great and I love the selection, that's because they designed it with your mental model in mind. And we can build those dynamic models by understanding how that mental model changes. We do it through something called high fidelity journey models, which identify the needs of the customer in data terms so your systems can respond. But at the end of the day, what these things can do is they can give you highly, highly contextualized and personalized experiences much more readily than we could in the past. We could do it in the past, but it would cost $1 million. Now it's more like $100,000. So those use cases, whether it's internal knowledge, whether it's customer support knowledge, whether it's field service engineer knowledge, whatever it is, every journey is a knowledge journey. And when you have product data, product information that is also aligned with knowledge, then you're giving people the products that they need and you're giving them the information they need to make those decisions.
I love that. And I'll bring it back into the chef example because I know you liked it, William. Like what I'm hearing too is like the data, it's like you're using every part of the vegetable. You're using every part of the animal. You're not just leaving something back if it's touching that customer interaction. Like that, you might be able to translate that into an ingredient to use data to serve up a better experience to the customer. And I can tell you, like, as somebody that's built so much AI and EX, for me, the number one use case to employees is their money. Like if they feel clarity of where their money is at, when do I get paid, my stocks, my RSUs, caring about their money. If they feel like you care about their money, then they will be open to more AI use cases. So that's my little EX one. William, what would you add to that when you're thinking about your customer interactions and what you see across the portfolio? What are some of those early use cases that really turn into momentum that really help these enterprises shift and go all in on AI because they see the ROI there of some of those early ones?
Yeah. And a lot of it comes down to like internal process, right? And a lot of what we've worked on with some of our clients is like, how do you get your internal use cases moving forward, right? The nice thing, if we talk about CX, right, data moves quickly in CX, and there's a lot of new operational processes you want to bring in, right, to keep things like your front end shopping experience like up to date and for your clients, right? It's very difficult sometimes to operationalize that. So a lot of times we've kind of taken the opposite approach with some of our clients, right, who don't have super and very mature operations around AI, which is let's look at some of your internal use cases, like how do you support your clients better, right? Like if they buy a product, right, like how does your support team support them, right? So we kind of moved into like our internal use cases. So, and that allows them to kind of build that muscle memory around, how should you process data? What data is useful to process within, your AI models, right? And in terms of just, how moving slowly has allowed them to move faster, right? Because that way, they're not trying to scramble to figure out all of the operations that they don't currently have, right? It allows them to build those operations internally and build that muscle memory so that they can slowly push that outward, right? And have like really successful experiences with their customers, whether they're using like conversational AI, chatbots, any type of like assistant, right? Like those are not easy things to build, right? But you can build those all internally and begin to get the right feedback. You can help, support your customers better, right? As opposed to improving that buying experience, immediately, right? So to me, like, working internally, sometimes for folks who don't have a lot of, rigor around it can be very beneficial to help them move faster in the long run.
All right, I'm going to do one more before we switch for, and this question comes from Guy Rousseau. I think it's a great one. How do you reconcile AI-driven decisions with data-driven business decisions? And when I see this, what I see, we'll start with you, Seth, and then over to you, William, on this. is like a lot of our leaders are used to making business-based decisions based on data pre-Gen AI, and that's how they're, that it's formatted that way. They're getting the results. They got the PowerPoints that way. But now there's this new work stream that they're trying to integrate into that. And what are some ways that they help upskill in that ability? Seth, and then William.
Sure. I think it's a little bit of a false dichotomy to say AI-driven versus data-driven because, well, first of all, we have found that executives say they want to be data-driven, and then we will present results that are data-driven, say this is the recommendation, this is how this should work, this is what our testing says, this is what our usability studies say, and then they'll say, yeah, no, I want to do it this way, right? So they'll try to game and manipulate the data to answer the question, answer it in a way that they wanted to answer it. And at the end of the day, they've rejected it. And then at the end, then you deploy and you find out, oh no, that was the wrong way. The way we originally determined this with data is the correct way. So we actually find many times that executives want to go with their gut rather than the data, even if the data looks very solid. So okay, let's assume they want data-driven decisions. The data from generative AI has to be the same data, it has to be your data. It can interpret it, it can provide new insights, it can provide new observations, it can sort through lots of information, but it still has to be your data. And so AI is a mechanism to get to data. It is not the source of data. We should not be using it as a source of data, especially when we're talking about organizational processes. Again, it is about your differentiation, your competitive advantage, which comes from your knowledge, your expertise, your content, your data, your information, your understanding of customers, your transactions, all of those things. AI is just a mechanism to make that more conversational. So there's no, you don't want AI driven versus data driven. It all should be data driven. AI is simply a tool and a layer to get to that data more conversationally. So that's my thinking. And, assume they want to be data driven, but you have to show them how the AI is getting to that data. You need an audit trail. You need to have traceability. You need to be able to show what that reasoning was if it's creating a new outcome or a new conclusion. So that's my perspective, is that it has to be based on data.
Yeah, I think the way I see this one too from guys, it's like it is a different sport than the sport that we used to be playing. So, it's switching from skiing to snowboarding. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm not going to get into that here. But it takes new muscles. It takes a new way of approaching things. I think that's probably what he's going to win. What would you add to this kind of conversation around AI-driven, data-driven business?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because, those of us who have been in the search industry for a long time know that, a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve in AI, we've been trying to solve with search for a very, very long time, right? How you get through explainability of why things are the way they are when you get results, right? And usually that's pretty weak or absent, right? When it comes to a lot of the AI tooling that's out there, you don't know exactly how ChatGPT got your answer. You just know that ChatGPT was trained on a bunch of stuff, and then there are, not to get too technical, different transformers that allow you to, get the type of response that you want, right? So the ability to be able to kind of troubleshoot, what a model is producing, right? And that could be from a regulatory perspective, that just could be from a legal perspective as well, right? But it's possible these days, and it's getting better, with how you're able to reverse engineer some of these things. But with generative models, even the experts aren't 100% sure why they're producing specific results. Right. And that's the really difficult part about this when we talk about, how do we leverage potentially. And I know the question was AI algorithmic optimization for big data. But, with a Gen AI focus webinar, right, when we look at Gen AI specifically for this, right, there are certain areas where you probably don't want to touch. Right. But there's areas where, maybe not talking about big data, but, we've been working with commerce vendors on how can we leverage Gen AI to help them standardize their data better. Right. If you have a big box store that gets products, and you have product information management that comes from multiple merchandisers and multiple companies, none of that is pretty standard. We've actually used big data big data in Gen AI, because most commerce data is already public, right? So there's a lot of good practices that GPT already has around, how can you templatize and prompt for, give me a better description for this product based off of the description that was currently there, as well as other products that relate closely to it, right? And then like make your prompt a little bit tighter so that hallucinations are a little bit less, right? And again, like when we talk about algorithmic optimization, like you've got to test that prompt, you've got to validate it, you've got to explain like what is giving back to you and still review that, right? So I think that explainability is something that is still kind of up in the air a little bit. But some of the stuff that we've done in the past, right, that isn't Gen AI related, like that stuff is actually getting a little bit better in terms of explainability as a whole.
That totally resonates with me, being a integrator of Gen AI technology inside the companies, because like before we take something into production from pilot, if we get a result from a Gen AI layer and it's unclear to us how it got there, that is like not gonna assure people's nerves, about going and no matter how well you do it, that's gonna happen sometimes. And one of the biggest things I've learned, it's not just about scope selection, it's also about scope limitation. So maybe your more sensitive workflows, you can limit out of the AI layer until you build confidence across the lower risk stuff, and then you can bring that in. Because if there's think about the most sensitive part of your business or your work, maybe we don't start with that as the first use case in terms of getting it into production. Okay, great conversation. I'm going to move us forward because a lot of folks, we want to learn now that we've learned about industry. Seth walked us through when AI fails. We've dug into some of our use cases and how you structure use case. William, let's learn more about LucidWorks.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if the slide is going to get pulled up here in a moment. Yeah. So let's talk a little about LucidWorks, right? And I want to keep this conversational. And as folks have been listening in, if there's a certain topic that you are interested in speaking with LucidWorks and or Seth and or Charles about, feel free to reach out to us. Very happy to engage with y'all, whether that's during this webinar or afterward. So LucidWorks, we've got our tagline, right? Like make search a superpower, right? Like it's our goal, right? We want to make sure that anyone out there who powers the search bar, right? Like we want, when your clients reach out to it, when your internal folks use the search bar or any other type of user interaction, we want them to feel good. Actually, to me, I want to make search your superpower, right? And something that within your organization you're very comfortable with deploying, right? So we do a lot of different things. We'll talk about the solution as a whole in a little bit, but just want to highlight a few things. And these three things we actually have pretty much talked about throughout this webinar so far. One is retrieval augmented generation. And for those who are either coming up to speed or don't necessarily know what that is, right? The goal around retrieval augmented generation is that you're using the LLM to get you some information about whether that's a request or a question that a user has sent to you, right? And instead of necessarily using the LLM as a whole to generate a response, right? So generating a response to public data, you would give the LLM potentially a small subset of your own data, right, with that question, and you would ask the LLM to basically say, look through these particular articles or documents and find the answer to this prompt if you can find it, and then generate that answer out of it, right? And also tell me, right, what document was used, right? So that you could go reference that as a source, right, at the end of the day, right? So, and this is one of those areas where when we talk about things that are regulatory, right, like this is an area where you actually get some proof, right, that the answer was generated from something, right? So we talk about that feedback and the ability to be able to see what's happening, right? So this is a really big piece of tech. It's quite complex as far as this type of thing goes, but it's evolving quickly, right? And a lot of folks, especially we've talked about those internal use cases, right? Like this is a perfect kind of segue into utilizing those types of internal use cases. Like how can you help people that your support team that's supporting people out in the field? How can you get answers to questions quickly? How could you use this for like wealth management, right? And take a lot of both public information as well as analytical data and use that, right? Retrieval augmented generation is something that we love doing. It's something that has kind of launched, I think almost all search engines into kind of a next level of effectiveness in terms of how we integrate with Gen AI without having to be fully kind of like Gen AI and LLM based. Content enrichment, like this is one area where there's a lot of benefit that you can have from, being able to get either whether it's your internal enterprise content or external content that's available to your customers. Like it makes data a little bit more accessible, right? Like we've got, different types of ETL tools that allow you to prep your data so that you can generate things like summarizations. You can kind of look through a document and get auto-generated frequently asked questions, right? If you don't have a taxonomy, right, how can you look through your product catalog, for example, and kind of generate, categories and taxonomies for it, right? So it allows you to leverage both the tooling that we already have internally, as well as, some of the external tooling like large language models to help you kind of build out that content enrichment as well. And then really kind of our full bread and butter, right? And we're a search company, right? So our goal is to obviously have a product that understands the query and or the questions, et cetera, that the user is sending, and also be able to personalize that to, what, they're sending and what they're saying, right? And this is kind of an interesting place, right? Because there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to get to this idea of like conversational search, right? And the idea is that, you'll be able to type in something, right? And hopefully whatever the user types in is, if it's a conversation, right? The goal is to go from what I call a transactional search bar, right, to an inspirational search bar, which means that you can, type something in to be inspired, right? And we've talked a lot about, internal use cases specifically. One of the hospitality brands that we work with, right? You think about, someone who is booking an airplane or someone who's booking a hotel, right? It's their search is pretty simple, right? You give them, a date range, you find a location, right? And they give you some hotels back, right? That might fit your description, right? But one of their goals was to say, hey, we kind of want to rebrand ourselves, right? Like we see a lot of competitors out there, that are trying to do like inspiration based vacations, right? So, rather than like completely ripping out their transactional based system, they actually added a new tab that said, hey, like, click on this if you're interested. If you don't know where you're going or what you want to do and you want to be inspired, we're going to not only give you like properties that are going to fit the type of query that you're sending us, but we're also going to give you activities that you can do, areas that, we sponsor, et cetera, so that, they're actually generating different types of business. So like their brand kind of focused around the idea that transactional search is actually working great. We're not going to replace that because there's still a need for that particular use case, but we are going to add something brand new, right? That's utilizing, LLMs to enhance, a different type of experience, right? It's somewhat of a rebranding for them without kind of getting rid of the things that they were already doing.
Yeah,
Charles, you look like you want to say something, so I'm gonna let you
well, just
pipe.
on that last one, what
Yeah.
I'm excited about, William, is like what as those conversations become more inspiring, then you get to learn more about your customer outside of a binary A or B track, and that can inform your offering. So like if it's a hotel, for instance, and they start asking a lot, hey, is there a great place to take an Instagram photo, which our millennial and Gen Z travelers want to do? Well, then the hotel can create that as an experience, and then they're creating those photos and they're also promoting the brand of the hotel, right? So you can learn that from that kind of open conversational interface with your customers. Whereas in the old transactional model, did this show your bill? Yes or no? You're not going to be able to do that. So back to you, William.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, our goal as kind of an organization, right, as we look at search as a whole, and a lot of search vendors out there and like AI vendors are, kind of fully SaaS at this point, right? And that's definitely created different types of challenges for customers who have now gotten used to the idea that things are SaaS. But then, of course, you've got the problem with privacy. So, our goal has been to, we have a SaaS offering, which is our full platform as well, but we also have an architectural offering that you can deploy on premise as well, and that can be deployed within your data center and or within your own private Google Cloud, Amazon, or Azure. And allows you to kind of choose like your deployment method for us, so that if you're concerned about any type of privacy, et cetera, like you still kind of control all of that. For us, like we have chosen to essentially be Gen AI an LLM agnostic, right? Our goal is not necessarily to say you've got to use ChatGPT or you've got to use Gemini or you have to, potentially bring your own models, right? Like our goal is to be as open as we can so that you can bring the best for your business, right? And that's something that has been really important to us that we want, especially within Gen AI. So much is changing, like to hitch our wagon on something specific just hasn't been. It's never really been in our blood to do that. So we want to have conversations with folks about the types of problems they're trying to solve with LLMs, and how we can integrate that with us. One of the areas that our clients have been super excited about is what we are calling neural hybrid search. So without getting too deep within the search realm, right, you've got lexical search, and that's, I think, if I look at AI-powered search and discovery, right, that lexical search understands things as lexical, right, so as how people speak and as terms and keywords, right. And over the last few years, there has been something called semantic vector search that has emerged, and that utilizes what's called vector databases and vectors and or embeddings to do relevancy model and ranking. So both going to serve their own purposes and properties. I don't think I need to get super deep into that right now, but the goal for us, like, we saw benefits from both and we saw the pros and cons for both, and we introduced something that actually combines both into one single ranking model. That allows our clients to take advantage, kind of a best of breed from both, kind of your old school keyword lexical search as well as semantic vector.
Yeah,
right?
I love that. What I'm hearing too. It's connecting their data, right, really quickly,
Absolutely.
and surfacing insights where they're valuable. Because
Yes.
fresh ingredients, if you don't surface the right insight to support that decision and it's stale, like the decision will be less for that. Hey, Seth, I'd love to pass it over to you. Do you have a follow-up question for William about their technology and this exciting way that they look to help enterprises?
Well, I think there's a lot to be said about retrieval augmented generation that we don't have time to get into, but I agree with William that it does take both. It takes a number of different ways, and modular RAG is something that actually takes multiple mechanisms to process the query. Again, we don't have time to get into that, but great stuff. Did you want me to jump into?
Yeah, absolutely, Seth. You want to bring us home and give us a kind of summary of what you're seeing about our state of AI?
So this is a little bit of a repeat, but we know that it's overhyped. We know that we have to demonstrate value, and we have to be very specific about that because leadership has been burned, right? They've spent a lot of time and money on this and they haven't gotten the results. And there's a lot of things that are changing very, very quickly, not only the technology landscape, but the needs of the customers. And we have to be able to allocate and reallocate resources in a way where we're getting return and we're measuring that return. And there's a whole bunch of stuff I have on ROI that we don't have time to get into today. But the point here is that we need to make sure we understand how a capability is linked to a key performance indicator. So again, that we are getting value from this. Of course, we have to have the knowledge, we have to have the data, we have to have the content. That's kind of table stakes. And we have to know where that data is coming from and if it's going to be available in a production environment. And when you start these things, you really have to start off with, well, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Let's not start with the technology. Let's not start with, getting our data. We can get our data house in order, but let's not start with the tools or the technology. We have to start with the business problem. And how will we measure it? Again, I'm going to be a broken record on that. How is it going to be measurable? What's the impact? How is the organization going to adapt to or act on new information or better quality information? This is the so what question. At the end of the day, so what? What are you going to get out of this new capability? How will you leverage it? What is it going to do for you? And of course, data. Where's it coming from? What's the quality? Can you scale a proof of concept? That's why, what's it going to be required to go out to production? That's why we build POVs, not POCs, because POCs never get out of POC, or most of them don't. And again, how do you go upstream to your vendors, to your data sources, to whoever those producers are, and have service level agreements that say they have to give you data in a certain format and of certain quality? The processes, how do we understand that process, and what aspect, what piece of that process will an intervention using AI impact or improve? And then who's going to own this? Who's going to be impacted? Who's going to fund this, right? Many times these are programs, not projects. So you can get funding in a short period of time, but really what you need to do is say, who's going to own this capability on an ongoing basis? And are you setting the expectations with the organization? Are you correctly informing them? Are you making sure you're not over promising, right? Because that's the killer. And when you start engaging with these at the start, when you start having this discussion, these are hard questions that you need to answer in advance. That is going to help you manage the expectations of the organization. And with that, I'll conclude with that. Go ahead and reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like to chat. Happy to chat with folks. You can just go to early.com if you want to find me. But there you go, and that's my finish up there.
All right. Hey, thanks for that, Seth. I'll go, and then William, you're going to get the last word in terms of insights to leave us on. And before we go there, I also just want to thank Seth. I want to thank you. I want to thank William, LucidWorks. It's awesome to jump into this AI space and our audience. We appreciate your questions. We appreciate your engagement. We appreciate you being here. I would say, stepping on what Seth just talked about, what I've noticed in bringing this technology into and creating value from it within companies is look around at your teammates, at your employees, and see who is really an early adopter and is quick to gain fluency in how this works. Because generally the folks in your company are going to fall into early adopter, wait and see, and then 3, it's like, I'm really, it's like, I'm really concerned about this. And you're going to notice there's just like, it's a new sport, new stars are emerging. You have stars in your company that gain fluency quickly, that want to hop on a call with a William or a Seth and solve problems. See if you can identify them and empower them. And it may not be the people that you thought it was, because the era has changed. So when I'm saying it's a new sport, it's a new talent, and find that talent that is good and fluent about realizing this value in-house. So that's my biggest advice here. Over to you, William.
Yeah, I mean, I think the clients that I feel like I've had the most success with and that I've spoken with are ones that have kind of we'll call it a very direct alignment on what they want to do with Gen AI, right? They have a very clear goal, right? Whether that could be rebranding, that could be efficiency, that could be something that is customer related, like a new experience for them to shop. But they're very aligned to doing one single thing, right? As an organization, and they want to get that thing across the line, right? So they either have data, they have, some insight, et cetera, that has told them that this is the one thing that they want to do. So I feel like that's one of the really important things, is like, if you've just got people out there that are just kind of throwing darts at the wall, you've got, 5 different data science organizations, and, marketing wants to do this, and sales wants to do this, et cetera, right? Like, if you're not aligned as an organization, right, then being successful with Gen AI is very difficult, and just AI in general in search, right? So the idea is, my best thing that I usually tell organizations is, especially when I talk with them, is like, are you really fully aligned to what you want to do, right? I can help, we at LucidWorks and I, try to help them figure out like what's going to make the biggest impact for their business. But it's certainly interesting as, our space specifically has been search for many years. Now we see a lot more data science. We've always seen data scientists, but we've never obviously worked with them in, a huge capacity, and they have their own initiatives that they want to do with search. The search folks, don't want to, obviously, Seth talked about losing his job and, not being relevant anymore in the industry, right? Like, the search people don't want to lose their jobs because there's new things coming. But obviously, I think like we have seen that there's room for both search and Gen AI to exist in, one technology ethos, right? And that's the really cool part about this, is that there's a lot of like new and fresh ideas that are coming. But at the end of the day, like, what really matters is, is your customer, is your client going to use it, right? And are you actually physically aligned as an organization, right, to a singular goal to get something out the door, right? And measure it, improve on it, and then kind of take what you've learned from there and kind of get that next thing moving forward.
Awesome, William. Last one. Folks that really want to get in contact and explore whether LucidWorks might be a great partner for them, what's a good next step for them to take?
Yeah, absolutely. You can obviously on our website, you can feel free to reach out and contact us, connect with me on LinkedIn as well. There's many folks at Lucerix that are super excited to talk with you guys about anything on a Gen AI related or AI related or search related. Like, we do a lot of different things at Lucerix at this point in time, but our goal really at the end of the day, I've always said this, right? Like, we in our blood is always like search and relevance, right? And having very relevant search. But at the end of the day, like, we want to hear your vision. We want to hear, we want to see what you're trying to get to, right? Sometimes a lot of folks think conceptually, but it's like, I love to kind of see, like, show me a Figma or something about what your end state looks like, right? And then let me tell you exactly how we can get there. And whether that involves Gen AI or not, sometimes like the overhype of Gen AI has actually clouded a lot of technologies, right? That could solve your problems in many cheaper ways, right? And the goal with our product is that you can solve them hopefully in cheaper ways as you continue to evolve your maturity, within Gen AI. So get a little bit of bang out of your buck quickly, and then invest more into it.
I'll go back to, I think one of our attendees said, Omar said, maturity informs strategy and strategy informs use cases. So, hey, thank you so much again. Thanks again, Seth, William, everybody for being on with us today. It was truly a pleasure to just jump into this world of AI and customer experience. Thanks, folks.
Hey, thanks, Charles. Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.